As dusk bled into a stormy night, the war ground on. Yesterday evening, under the cover of a gathering tempest, a critical logistical operation was underway. At precisely 6:45 p.m. local time, a large Russian military convoy began its final approach along a winding road paralleling the Donets River. This wasn't just a routine supply run, it was a lifeline. The column of 20 heavy-duty trucks, a mix of Ural and Kamaz models, stretched for nearly a kilometer. They carried the essential sinews of modern warfare, thousands of gallons of diesel fuel and tons of artillery shells and small arms ammunition. This vital payload was destined for 3 depleted divisions holding a precarious position on the Porks front, where Russian forces were struggling to maintain pressure. Without these supplies, their artillery would fall silent and their armored units would be immobilized. The drivers, conscripts, and contractors alike navigated a treacherous, rain-slicked road. Visibility was plummeting, obscured by the relentless downpour and pockets of dense fog rolling off the river. The storm they believed was their cover was, in fact, helping to set a trap, because they were being watched. Miles away, hidden from sight and shielded from electronic detection, a small, highly trained team of Ukrainian drone operators had been tracking the convoy's progress for over an hour. In less than 8 minutes, this entire critical supply line would be systematically annihilated. The impending destruction would not come from expensive cruise missiles or a large-scale ground assault, but by a coordinated swarm of cheap, commercially available drones, modified for a singular, deadly purpose. This was no random act of opportunity. It was a meticulously planned ambush, choreographed to exploit the weather, the terrain, and the convoy's own vulnerabilities. The kill zone was a narrow iron bridge spanning a deep ravine, a natural choke point with no escape. As the lead fuel tanker rumbled onto the bridge, the operators gave the final command. The attack began with a silent, high-speed approach, culminating in a violent explosion that engulfed the lead truck, instantly sealing the convoy's fate. The narrow iron bridge, the only path forward, turned into a raging furnace, trapping the entire column behind a wall of fire and twisted steel. The operation had just begun. The plan to destroy the convoy began 72 hours earlier. It was a calculated operation built on detailed intelligence. They used satellite imagery, reconnaissance drones, and sophisticated weather modeling to build a precise 3D map of the route. Every curve, every choke point, the iron bridge, logged. They saw the storm not as obstacle, but as ally. Intelligence gathering happened in silence. Small drones mapped terrain and rising river levels. Forecast precision let them time the strike for near-zero visibility. That convoy was the offensive's backbone. Every detail served one goal: halt the advance and save lives. The primary weapons in this assault were not sophisticated military hardware, but 12 small FPV racing drones. These are devices born from a civilian hobby, prized for their speed and maneuverability. Commercially available and built from simple components, they represent a new, accessible frontier in asymmetric warfare. Their lightweight carbon fiber frames and powerful motors were designed for agility, not for combat, making their adaptation for this mission a study in battlefield ingenuity. Each drone cost roughly $420 to assemble. They were hobbyist devices, stripped down and rebuilt for a singular, deadly purpose. Non-essential components were removed to save weight, while frames were reinforced to handle the added payload and the punishing weather conditions. This process transformed a recreational gadget into a precision-guided munition, blurring the line between civilian technology and military-grade threat. Each drone carried a compact shaped charge warhead specifically designed to defeat armor. Upon detonation, the charge focuses its explosive energy into a narrow, high-velocity jet of molten metal, capable of penetrating the steel hulls of armored vehicles. The effectiveness of the weapon depends entirely on a direct, precise hit, a task assigned to the drone's onboard intelligence. Guiding each drone was a custom-programmed AI navigation chip, This tiny processor was the brain of the operation. It constantly analyzed sensor data, reading the turbulent wind patterns and making thousands of micro-adjustments per second to stabilize flight through the chaotic storm. This autonomous capability was critical. It allowed the drones to fly low and fast in conditions that would ground more conventional aircraft and overwhelm a human pilot. A single 22-year-old engineer, operating from a concealed bunker several kilometers away, orchestrated the swarm. The 12 drones launched in sequence, synchronizing their flight paths to move as one coordinated entity. This swarm logic was designed not just for attack, but for deception. On the defenders' radar screens, what might have initially appeared as a single, ambiguous contact suddenly fractured into 12. The targets were erratic, flying dangerously low and presenting a tiny radar cross-section, making them difficult to track. The sheer number of simultaneous, unconventional threats caused the system's automated threat analysis to stutter, struggling to prioritize targets that defied standard profiles. The deception was layered. 2 of the drones were programmed as decoys. They broke from the main swarm, climbing higher and flying slower, presenting a larger, more tempting target profile. The air defense operator, facing a confusing tactical picture, made a split-second decision and fired 2 surface-to-air missiles, each costing well over $100,000. As 2 explosions lit up the stormy sky, the defenders cheered, believing they had neutralized the primary threat. They were unaware they had just taken the bait. In that brief moment of distraction, the remaining 10 drones executed their next command, dropping even lower to slip into the radar blind spot created by the river valley's terrain. Their AI adjusted their flight patterns to mimic the erratic movement of birds caught in a storm, their electronic and acoustic signatures dissolving into the background noise of the weather. For the defense system, they had vanished. The storm was a deliberately chosen weapon. Rain blinded optical sensors, making visual spotting impossible. Storm noise masked the drone's electric buzz. Fog reduced visibility to near zero, forcing a crawl and tight spacing. Easy targets. Long-range surveillance was defeated. The weather carved a perfect kill box. The bridge was the only crossing for miles. Mud made turning nearly impossible. One truck fishtailed, chaos timed to the minute. Rain created ground clutter that hid small drone signatures. A carrier released FPVs high above the storm, Banshee 7 among them. A heat seeker chased the hotter decoy, another missile wasted. At precisely 6:50 p.m., the first strike drone, designated Banshee 7, reached its terminal phase. Its target was the lead fuel tanker, the linchpin of the entire convoy. The drone's onboard AI, compensating for wind shear and the vehicle's momentum, guided it to a pre-calculated impact point on the tanker's flank. The goal was not just destruction, but to create an impassable barrier, trapping the vehicles behind it. It slammed into the truck's thin aluminum shell at over 200 miles per hour. The impact itself was almost silent, a dull thud lost in the storm. But the drone's design incorporated a critical feature: a half-second fuse delay. This fractional pause was just long enough for the drone to penetrate deep inside the tank before its shaped charge detonated. The charge didn't just explode, it focused its energy into a superheated jet of molten copper, piercing the internal baffles and atomizing the surrounding fuel. This created a highly volatile fuel-air mixture within the confined space of the tank. Thousands of gallons of diesel fuel, now an aerosolized mist, ignited in a catastrophic detonation. The resulting fireball expanded at supersonic speed, a wave of incandescent plasma that vaporized the tanker and the bridge deck beneath it. Temperatures inside the initial blast zone spiked to over 3,000 degrees Celsius, instantly melting steel and concrete. A pressure wave, a brutal wall of compressed air exceeding 200 pounds per square inch, rolled backward through the column. It ripped tarps from cargo beds, shattered windshields, and slammed into the adjacent trucks with the force of a physical blow. This overpressure was the primary catalyst for the chain reaction that followed. The intense radiant heat and the crushing shockwave compromised the integrity of the vehicles immediately behind the tanker. Ammunition crates, weakened by the blast, began to cook off. The first to go was an artillery supply truck. Its shells detonated not in a single blast, but in a series of rapid, violent explosions, sending shrapnel tearing through the convoy. This triggered a deadly domino effect. Truck after truck exploded, each detonation feeding the next. Fuel tanks ruptured, igniting their contents. Munitions sympathetic detonated, their explosive force amplified by the confined space. The bridge, now a furnace, began to groan under the thermal and kinetic stress. The valley's steep walls acted like the barrel of a gun, containing and focusing the blast energy, funneling it down the length of the trapped column and magnifying the destruction exponentially. Flaming wrecks and sections of the collapsing bridge slid into the raging current, extinguished with a hiss of steam and a cloud of acrid smoke. From orbit, reconnaissance satellites registered the event as a massive thermal spike. A black column of soot and debris rose miles into the atmosphere, a man-made volcano erupting through the heart of the storm. On the ground, the front half of the convoy was obliterated, reduced to a contiguous scar of molten metal and burning debris. What remained of the bridge was a blackened, skeletal ruin. The rest of the column, spared the direct explosions but battered by the shockwave, sat paralyzed by a mixture of confusion and terror. High above the chaos, a recorder drone circled patiently, its sensors capturing every detail for post-strike analysis. In just 7 minutes, the attack had concluded. 8,000 gallons of fuel, 5 tons of ammunition, and the majority of the convoy's vehicles were gone. The operation was a complete success. Logistics for the planned offensive collapsed. On the Pork's front, 500 guns went silent, starved of shells. Armor stalled without fuel. The advance halted before it began. Morale cratered. Myths raced faster than reports. Even an A-50 arrived to find only smoke and a heat signature. No troops to fight, no intact drones. Air defenses battled ghosts. Low-cost tech, smart planning, and weather turned into a weapon, defeating expensive, complex systems. Defenders must adapt quickly, using layered protection and sensors that detect, classify, and neutralize swarms, even in storms. A 22-year-old achieved what once took an entire air force. In this new era, cheap does not mean weak, and the smartest warrior isn't the one with the biggest weapon.